This episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Byron Seeds. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds. Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Soil Biotics. Efficient is Soil Biotics fish emulsion-based liquid organic fertilizer additive. This product is a rich source of nutrients that slowly break down and release nitrogen into the soil. It is an excellent food source for soil microbes and helps relieve plant stress in the event of drought, heat, and excessive water conditions. To learn more about Efficient, visit soilbiotics.com or call 815-929-1752.
Listening to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood, we are in San Diego, California with Dani Valazquez de Leon, who is the general manager of Organics Unlimited. They are an importer of organic bananas. So, Dani, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be here. And can you give us a little bit of a background of you and also of Organics Unlimited, what you are and what you do?
Of course. Mike, it's good to have you here. I'm happy to be on the podcast. I'm Daniella, or Dani Valazquez de Leon. I'm the fourth generation organic banana growers and third generation in our family business. My grandfather was the first to market organic bananas in the States back in the 70s. And after my grandparents retired, my parents decided to do what they knew best, and they started Organics Unlimited in 2000. We're growers, we pack the fruit, we're wholesalers, so we're a pretty vertically organized organization. And I joined the company, like 5 or 6 years ago. I originally wanted to forge my own path, but after going to a few trade shows with my parents, especially I know you got to meet folks from OGC, and they have a fantastic trade show called Organicology. And after seeing how passionate people are about organic, I knew I had to be a part of it. And so here I am now.
Mm-hmm. And was it always organic, or was it conventional bananas and then switched to organic once Organics Unlimited was started?
We've always been 100% organic. Ever since my grandfather started the company back in the 70s, it was only organic. We were actually initially called Produce Unlimited here, and we ended up switching it because we only do organic, so that's why it's actually called Organics Unlimited.
And where do most of the bananas come from?
I would say about 90% of our production comes from Mexico. We have our own farms there. And we also work with a lot of small growers who we've been working with for decades. Folks that my grandfather worked with back in the 70s, and now I'm working with either their children or their grandchildren. So I would say most of our production comes from Mexico. About 10% comes from a cooperative of small growers in Ecuador. And that just makes sure that we always have year-round supply, because you never know when you're going to get a hurricane or some other curveball from Mother Nature.
And can you give me a picture? I mean, I wish we could go down and see one of the farms, but can you give a picture of what a banana farm would look like and how it would operate?
Sure. So where do we start? How does it operate?
How big a farm would typically be growing bananas, and then, organic in particular, different practices that would happen?
So we work with growers who have farms as small as 5 hectares. We have about 170 hectares that we manage personally. So it ranges from anywhere from 5 hectares to even way larger than our plantations. If you go to other countries in Latin America, like Ecuador, which is known as the Walmart of bananas, you'll see bananas as far as the eye can see. But in Mexico, it tends to be smaller growers. What else can I tell you about bananas? They are actually not grown on banana trees. It's actually the largest herb. I think that's a fun fact. Yep.
Herb.
It's the largest herb.
Wow. I always thought it was a banana tree.
Yep. There you go. Now you have a fun fact. So they can grow up to be around 6 feet tall, and they take 9 months to produce a bunch. So the same as a human. And then after that, it continues to provide fruit. It's all the same plant. So what happens is it's known as the mother, which is the main stalk, and then the mother will sprout a lot of stalks around her. And one of the main labors is choosing to see which is the strongest son, we call them, and that's the one that stays. The other ones are cut so that all of the energy is going straight into that one stalk, which is going to provide the strongest, best quality fruit. And the same process happens over and over. Once the mother's fruit is harvested, then you cut the mother, and then the son becomes the new mother.
And is it one bunch per plant, or is it multiple bunches?
So a bunch, I know
how you call it.
No.
Like, I'm just gonna show my ignorance because I know nothing about bananas except how they look.
No, this is totally fine. So I know when we go to the store, we think of a bunch as, the little bunches that you buy. They're like 5 or 6 bananas. But at the farms, the bunches are, I guess this doesn't work for a podcast, but you can see right there, it's massive. It weighs like 40, 50 pounds, and you get a lot of different bunches from that. So what happens when it's ready to be harvested is that we have a big pulley system because they're super heavy. So they'll get hooked onto the pulley system, and then they get pulled all the way to the packing house. And that's where there's people who are selecting the bunches and making sure that, the fingers that are getting chosen fit the quality specs and all that good stuff. And it's amazing how quick they do it. If you saw just their dexterity in handling the product, it's really astounding.
So how big, I'm trying to picture this in my head and having a hard time. How big a plant, we're talking about the fruit, but how big of a plant, how much space does just one of those
bunch?
Or one full plant with a bunch on it?
Okay, so one plant is, you can imagine it to be like 5-6 feet.
Tall.
Yeah. So maybe a very, very tall human.
Okay.
6 feet. And, or a little more. And then the bunch is going to be, what is this? Like
4 feet?
4 foot?
Yeah. Like maybe.
And then around like 2 feet around. And then they harvest it and hang it on the cable system?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then the plants are planted in rows, and then the cable system goes in between the row?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I should have like pulled up some banana harvesting videos on the way here.
I can definitely show you some before you leave. I know that a lot of this doesn't quite lend itself to a podcast since it's visual, but
part of we don't prepare a ton for this exact reason, because we want to like help to paint a picture of the way this actually works. But so with these plants, and I don't want to bash conventional because we're not intentionally doing that, but what would be a different practices that on an organic banana farm would be done that a conventional farm you want to stay away from, that kind of thing?
The biggest piece is pesticides.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, in a conventional farm, the workers need to be wearing full gear because, it's just such a harsh chemical that it poses a health risk. And not just that, but all of the runoff that's going to affect, the pollution, and it affects the local communities. In an organic farm, you're not going to be using that. It's just fostering a much better ecosystem. You're taking advantage of cover crops that are nourishing the soil. You use the full plant when you harvest it. The mother stalk stays there, and that provides a lot of potassium for the soil in a natural manner. I was going to say something and then I blanked.
So using the full plant, and how long would the mother stalk stay there? What's the lifespan of that?
Years.
Okay.
Years.
So it's like a tree in that it can last a long time. But, obviously when we think of bananas, we're thinking of the ones we buy in the store again. You say the whole plant is used. What else is being harvested that's then used from that plant? Is it the leaves or what? So
there's most of the plant is used just to go back to provide some more cover for the floor. If you walk a farm, you'll see there's a lot of leaves and stalks on the floor. You'll see a lot of that. What you don't want to see is weeds and just stuff that you don't want to be there. But yeah, overall, it would be the full plant is getting used back on the floor to nourish the soil. And then in terms of the whole bunch, we try to use everything. So there are strict specifications for the export market. It has to be between 7 to 8 inches and it needs to weigh this. And so it gets complicated because Mother Nature isn't a factory. If you look at a bunch of bananas, you're going to have the smaller bananas up top and at the bottom. And then in the middle, you have the much larger fingers. Luckily, we have different markets. For example, Japan likes the smaller fingers. They like a 5 to 6 inch banana. Americans like big bananas. So we have different markets. And then we also take advantage of secondary national markets are a lot more open. I feel like the national market is used to seeing bananas that maybe are different sizes or might have a few little blemishes, and they know that the bananas are just still going to taste the same. And then whatever we can't move in the national market, we'll send for processing.
For what would that then be made into?
Frozen bananas. You could also get banana flour, which I hear is a big thing these days.
That's a new one.
I haven't tried it, but I've heard of a lot of things that bananas are used for. And then just one, I remembered my train of thought that I lost earlier. So since we're not using pesticides, one big thing is it's a lot more labor intensive to run an organic farm. So one of the big threats in banana farms is cigatoca, which is a fungus that affects all bananas. I'm sure, or I don't know if you've heard of the possibility of bananas going extinct.
No.
Have you heard of this?
No.
This is a thing. Back in the 50s, we used to eat a different banana. It was called the Gros Michel, and it went extinct because there was a fungus called Fusarium wilt. And thankfully, scientists came up with the Cavendish banana, which is what we have now. But the threat is there again. And so luckily, it hasn't reached Mexico, but a lot of other Latin American countries and countries around the world are dealing with this. And once it hits your farm, it's a done deal.
What does it cause?
Don't quote me on this, but I believe it mainly affects the leaves, which is where you're getting all of the nutrients from. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But we do deal with a lot of fungi, and one of the biggest ones is cigatoca. And whereas on a conventional farm, you would spray the pesticide and you're good to go. Here we have people who need to walk the farm on a daily basis, and that's their role. They're called cigatoqueros, like it's in their name. They walk the farm and make sure that the fungus isn't affecting the plant. So, and it's inevitable. You need to live with it, right? So if you see the fungus on a leaf, you'll assess it and say, okay, well, we can, they call it doing surgery, but you'll cut the piece that's affected. If it's affected more than a certain percentage of the leaf, you need to cut the leaf, and you can't harvest a bunch of bananas with less than 4 leaves. Like that's cutting it close, because it can affect the quality of the product. So ideally you're dealing with 6+ leaves. And so that's something that's very different in a conventional versus an organic farm, is that it takes a lot more manpower to be walking the farm regularly and making sure that you're able to live in symbiosis with nature versus killing everything off.
And so you would have that blight on your farms. It's just you have to control it without chemicals.
Correct.
Okay. So it would be a little bit like when we were at Uncle Matt's and greening in oranges, how that's basically wiped out the oranges in Florida and moved it to, Texas, California and Mexico, which they're also working on an orange that's resistant to it, but I never heard anything about it being something similar being in the bananas.
And then that gets complicated too, right? Because organic is non-GMO, but I've heard people talk about the option of like CRISPR, I think it's called, finding a way to make the bananas resistant to it. But then, is that still organic? You get into this very fuzzy arena. So, I mean, ideally, we're able to farm the right way and farm in a way where the plants or the fungus and the different bacteria that we're exposed to doesn't become resistant to all of these different things that we're throwing at it. And I think when you're farming in an organic manner, you're naturally creating soil and plants that are sturdier and stronger. So yes, it's more difficult in certain aspects, but I think in the long run, that's going to give you the more sturdy, sustainable farms.
So when I look at that picture on the wall, that calendar, the bananas, when you harvest them, are bright green, correct?
Yep.
And so is that harvesting them before they're ripe, or do they need to be off the vine or whatever to ripen?
So all of the bananas that are harvested everywhere at a commercial level are bright green, and they arrive here and need to be ripened closer to where they're going to end up at a store. And this is because as soon as a banana starts ripening, and I'm sure you've seen it at home, as soon as it starts ripening, it's going to go bad in a few days. So what's done is that we have distributors who pick up the product. They're a lot closer to the retailers because you don't want to ripen it super far away, because then you can't stop the ripening process. So there's different stages of ripeness. And so retailers will say, hey, I want a stage 3 or a stage 4. And the distributor will then release ethylene gas, which is the gas that's naturally released by bananas when they start to ripen. And they'll raise the temperature of the room. And then that starts the ripening process so that they get to the store at a nice yellow color, a little bit of green on the end still, and so that they last a much longer time. Which is also why if you have bananas that are ripening, if you put them in a bag with like a ripe avocado or a ripe apple, and you put it in an oven, obviously with the oven off, but just in an enclosed location, that it'll kick off the ripening a little quicker.
So how long can you keep the bananas in cold storage before they need to be like ripened?
Well, and I want to go back as you're talking about that, like what time of year are bananas harvested, and then on the farm, leading into Mike's question of how long can they, or what is done packing wise on the farm, and how long can they last from that point?
So bananas are harvested year round. We do have peaks in production. So the first half of the year is low season. It's winter down at the farm, so colder weather just means that they don't reach the necessary grade. And so once you have a bunch on your stock, it'll take around 10 weeks for the bananas to reach the point where they can be harvested. In the winter, they take closer to 12 or 13 weeks. In the summer, sometimes 9. So first half of the year is low season, and it also coincides with the time when people want the most bananas because other produce isn't in season. And then second half of the year, which is when the temperature goes up, it's summer, it's really warm, that's when there's a lot of other produce in market and demand goes down. So that was an answer to your harvesting question. So we're harvesting every single week. Mm-hmm. So for a point of reference on our farms, there's normally like 7 loads of bananas a week that are harvested, and there's 960 cases on a load.
And how many cases, or how many bananas would be in a case?
16 times 5.
Okay.
About 40 pounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, they're loaded. Would they be loaded into boxes and then put into cold storage until a truck comes to pick them up at that point?
Correct. So all of the farms have their own packing stations. So once they arrive at the packing station, first you get the different bunches. They go through a big bath just to get all of the latex off. I don't know if you've ever, when you handle bananas, you can get stained easily. And that's because of the latex that comes off of the crown or the top of the bananas. So
is that why they wrap that little thing around
Interesting,
the top?
you should bring that up. So that is actually something that we don't use. We can if customers ask for it, but we try not to. That's actually meant to stop any fungus from growing on the crown. But we try to use as minimal packaging as possible. So for the most part, we're only using little PLU stickers. And we use a citrus-based product on the crowns so that they won't grow any fungus. You see a lot of the plastic wrapper on conventional production, and I think that's why it's become a lot more prevalent in organic. But the way we see it is, if you don't need it, why add another plastic-based packaging when you don't need it?
And that would be a fungus that would be in the banana when somebody's consuming it? Or
no, so when you cut the banana, it's kind of at the area where it's cut.
Sure, yep.
So it's fresh. And so that's why you first run it through the water to make sure that all the latex comes off, and then the product seals it. So essentially there's just not a fresh cut. It's same as when you have a cut on yourself. If you kind of want it to be dry and it scabs over, and then you're good to go. Mm-hmm. If it's not to get too graphic, but it gets nasty.
Yeah. Yep. Infected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so then, how long will each week bananas are harvested, brought here? How long? Let's say you left those bananas in cold storage for. How long would they last until they just went bad on you?
Weeks.
Okay.
Weeks, but here our turnaround time is, they're normally not in the warehouse for more than 3 or 4 days. And that's because since we're growing in Mexico, we harvest upon order. So we'll get our orders in and then harvest them the next week. They're at our warehouse within 3 days from harvest. And if you compare that to most Latin American banana producing countries, the transit time to the States is 2+ weeks. So it's 2 weeks, and then transit time to wherever they're going to get ripened, add a few days for ripening, and then it gets delivered to the retailer. So you compare that to fruit that comes from Mexico. 3 days from harvest arrives here. Another 3-4 days it arrives at the distributor. So you could have fruit at your retailer within a week, 10 days.
You mentioned you harvest on order. So how do you have a pretty good sized window on when they need to be harvested? Like, it's not like, okay, this bunch, or what do you call it? Is it a bunch?
Yes.
Okay, the bunch is ready to harvest today. Now we cannot let that thing stay on there for a week, or is the window pretty long?
That is something that we face in the summer. In the winter, not so much, because again, we have more time, which is a blessing and a curse, for it to reach the necessary grade. In the summer, it's developing a lot faster and the demand isn't as high. So we do reach points where if we're having really great production one summer and the demand just isn't there, then we need to find alternate markets. And a lot of the time that fruit does end up going to processing.
And do you have people that just buy the bananas just for the processing side of it, like alternative markets in for that need?
Yes, because, well, we know that out of everything that gets harvested, I would say about, like 1% you're not going to be able to sell. And so we always have a customer that always needs bananas for processing.
And with that going, like, let's say you buy a banana yogurt, would it go into products like that?
Sure. I mean, when my grandfather had his business, my mom never forgets to remind us that during the summers when she and her 2 sisters and brother would come visit San Diego, because they grew up in Mexico, but my grandfather's business was based out of San Diego. They would come visit him in the summer, and he would have them peeling bananas, because they would sell the frozen bananas for Gerber companies.
Oh, no kidding.
Baby food.
I think it was called Earth's Best Baby Food.
Oh, that's still around.
Yeah? Okay. Well, there you go. Child labor back in the 70s.
Things have streamlined a little bit since then.
I think so.
So, I mean, the way that this has kind of worked out is we've started on the farm, and now, I'm just kind of picturing this supply chain, essentially. They've made it here, and then where is everything being distributed from here? And are you're staging bananas here and then distributors come pick up, or you're delivering directly to store, and what brands and all that kind of detail?
So right now, 100% of what we sell is our own brand. We have our grow label, which is our socially responsible label, though, I mean, all of our bananas come from the same farms. They're all fairly traded. We pride ourselves in providing a fair price to our growers, because we're growers ourselves and we know what goes into growing bananas. But right now, all of it is our own labels. 90% is grow. The way grow works is that 60 cents of every case goes into the grow fund, and then the grow fund is independently managed by the International Community Foundation, just to ensure transparency, and it funds a lot of programs in the growing communities, primarily scholarships, but we also do dental and vision clinics, clean water programs, and the sort. But they're all
that
on
would
labels.
be done in the areas where the farmers are?
Correct. So we have programs in Ecuador as well as Colima, and we work with nonprofit organizations that work in the area and know the needs of the community. And yeah, I mean, we've been working with them for years, and it's been a great experience. I think one of the most gratifying parts of working for the family business is getting the communication from all of the scholarship recipients and seeing how they start out, in middle school. And these are areas where there's high poverty rates. So I think here in the States, we're used to kids being able to finish high school. And in Mexico, the rate of kids getting to high school, I think, is like 60%. And then kids graduating high school is like 40% of that. So they're encouraged to go help their parents get money for their family. Makes perfect sense. But what the GROW program does is that it teaches them the value of an education and teaches them that if you're able to graduate college, oftentimes they're the first in their family to graduate college. You can bring so much more back to your family and to your community. I mean, we've had kids who graduate and then come back and open businesses in their town or become teachers. Or I know one became a doctor, and she was like the head of one of the government health agencies in Colima. So that's one of my favorite parts, I think, is just receiving communication from the scholarship recipients and seeing, what they're able to do just from being part of the GROW program.
And when you said 60 cents per case?
Mm-hmm.
And there's
correct.
How many cases on a truck?
960.
900?
Math adds up pretty quick.
Yeah, real quick. That's really impressive.
It's not a lot, especially if you divide it by, a pound of bananas. There's 40 pounds in a case. So when you divide it by 40 pounds, it's really nothing. And I mean, bananas are notorious for being very underpriced. But I think that one thing I'm grateful for as well is working with independent retailers who really understand the value of paying fair prices for their produce. And so 60 cents, it's going to go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's spread really thin with a pound of bananas, but you're moving enough pounds that is still adding up quite significantly.
Exactly. And what I think resonates with our customers as well is that we have volunteer programs. So there's every retailer that we work with gets a certain number of passes, I guess, or volunteer weeks where they can go down to the farms. They're able to tour the farms, see how bananas are grown, see how they're harvested. And then they spent a week at, it's called Casa Amiga, which is where the scholarship recipients are housed so that they can go to school, because a lot of them live in more remote places. And they get to engage with the kids and actually see where the money is growing and see that we're actually walking the talk, and that just 60 cents goes a really long way.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be some powerful time for those consumers or the buyers, and help to convince them, hey, pay a little bit more to help people. But going back to the farm side, I did want to ask about pricing of bananas, and how are farmers paid, like per pound or per, how's that work, and what are prices, and where have they been historically, and where are they at now?
So growers get paid per pound. It's been a tough road. I mean, we've been in organic for decades now, and we've seen that as larger companies have entered the space, companies that are used to conventional prices, there's been significant downward pressure on the price of an organic case of bananas. And to put that into perspective, prices haven't gone up in the past 9 years. Something that we really pushed for in 2021 was that fair price. And that's something that we really pride ourselves in, is being able to pay a fair price and being able to pay full benefits for our workers, which again is not the case. And benefits means your cost goes up 30%. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you live by your values, and you hope it pays off in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And are you seeing over the last, let's just say 10 years, have most of the major big companies that are in bananas, have they all jumped into the organic market for the most part?
Yes. At this point, all of the major banana companies are both in conventional and organic.
Mm-hmm. And that has driven the price down to the farmer?
Yes, it has.
It's a blessing and a curse to have organic be continuing to grow as far as consumers purchasing organic products. Because as it's grown, bigger companies have come in, and when they come in, they're starting to look at cost. I mean, we've seen it. We've interviewed, everything from orange farmers to dairy farmers to blueberry farmers. I mean, it's the same in every part of the organic space. So that's part of why we want to hear the story, because people need to hear it.
Yeah, and it's tough. We were talking about it earlier, but there's such a consolidation of our food system, and we saw the risks that entails during the pandemic with all of the meat processing factories that were just shut down, and everything's consolidated in one place. It's not a resilient food system. And the same is going to happen when you have just a few retailers, a few wholesalers in the space. It's not resilient. When you're relying on a diversified food system, independent retailers, family growers, that's providing for a thriving economy. Those smaller family businesses are the ones that keep your local economies going. And something that makes me proud is being part of organic, because I know that that's where the roots come from. The roots come from, yes, an industry that is going to look after our environment, but also look after our people. It started from, getting fair prices for growers, and, here we are again. So I think that there's a lot of people in the industry that are like-minded and believe in supporting independent and supporting fair prices, and that's where we hope it keeps headed.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the farms, the independent growers, that's a huge part of that puzzle. Because when you get bigger companies, usually they're wanting to do it in one location close to where they're shipping out of, and on larger locations. And then, I don't know anything about bananas, but as far as growing bananas, but the disease that you're seeing, we see that in other industries, and a lot of time it's because it's concentrated in one spot. Yep. And that's what causes. And then what happens to the supply chain when that goes through one large operation? It's done.
Exactly. So and then, I think Organic Valley has done an awesome job of uniting all of these different suppliers together. I think that's a game changer. And that's just a side note, but I think it would be interesting to see more industries within, for us, produce, but just the food system as a whole, work something like that out.
Now, I do want to make sure to ask that, as far as going back to the overall your supply chain, we got up to the brand you're selling under. Where is that mainly on the West Coast, or are you nationwide, or how far a reach do you guys have?
We sell fruit as far away as Japan. We've been working with our Japanese customers since my grandfather started, and we're still working with the same family. And here in the States, we can get fruit to any part of the States. I would say our strongest region is the West Coast, especially the Pacific Northwest. And we also get product into Canada.
Nice.
Do you have distribution like in the Midwest or the East Coast?
We could. Again, the good thing about sourcing from Ecuador and Mexico is that we're able to take the route that makes the most logistical sense. The Midwest is great because Texas is just 2 days from harvest. So we can get it to the Texas border within 2 days, and then it's just...
So you
straight
don't,
shot.
not everything runs through the location where we are today.
Correct.
You send basically drop ship direct.
Yeah, a lot. For example, everything that goes to Japan is shipped by sea directly from the port of Manzanillo. So that, yeah, and that takes about 2 weeks to reach Japan. So it just depends on what makes the most logistical sense.
Well, and I know why Mike's asking if it's sold in the Midwest and the East.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
Be sure to ask your local distributor.
Because it is hard to, I mean, my house has bananas in it all the time. I mean, that's like, I try to grow a lot of my own food, but in the Midwest, I can't grow bananas.
Yeah,
So,
bananas is one of those things where it's not something that's grown commercially in the States. The States just doesn't have the tropical weather needed to grow bananas. So Mexico is really as local as it gets.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But as far as what's available for us, most of it would be, I'm buying organic, but it would be a large company that I'm buying from. So hopefully still supporting farmers, but
yeah, I mean, you make the best choices with what you have, right? I mean, when I go to the store, there's times when I start stressing out. It's like, do you choose organic? Do you choose local? What's the best choice? And it's like this ethical conundrum. And so, I mean, you just do the best with what you got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But once we hear the story, then, that's always where the tie is made, is when we can hear the story, then I know, hey, that's the bananas I want, or that's the whatever product it is I want.
And the whole thing is, most consumers that are looking at buying organic bananas, that 60 cents would be completely irrelevant if they actually hear the story. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is, how can we help get that story out there? Because I think a lot of organic consumers will connect to a story if they know that it's more expensive, but it's a lot harder to grow. These farmers are working extra hard. So if they know that those dollars are going back to help those communities and those farmers, most consumers are willing to do that. But how can we get that story out?
I think the biggest piece is, you hit the nail on the head, it's just education. I think a lot of the times we're so disconnected from our farmers that when somebody goes to buy a banana, a lot of the times they're not looking at where it came from. So you might not even know what brand it is. A lot of times you might not even care. All you know is that you need bananas. And I think that if we could just do a better job of educating consumers on what actually goes into growing bananas, and just telling the story of the farmers, that would be a game changer. Because we're very lucky that we're growers and we're also wholesalers and we're based out of San Diego. But the grand majority of farmers, especially smaller farmers, don't have that voice in market. Our growers that have 5 hectares, there's no way that they're able to get their message or their experience out to the end market. So I do think education is key.
Mm-hmm. So do you have farmers reaching out to you that would like to grow bananas for you? Or what are their options as far as a market? Are they just selling locally, like a small farm? Or do they contract with the other bigger companies? How does that work?
So we were the first to develop the organic market in Colima. At this point, all of the major multinational companies are there as well. So a lot of the volume is contracted out to the larger companies. But even now, when we're in low season, January, when nobody has fruit, I mean, from what I've heard, I think distributors have been around like 30% short on bananas. And it's a product that you need to have in store. That's kind of the one thing that reels people into the produce market. Even so, we have growers who are regularly reaching out, and they just reach out regularly and are like, hey, do you have space for us in your program? And so the desire is there. And again, it comes back to fair prices. We pay within 2 weeks, whereas most other companies pay within a month. And that's you're essentially having your growers finance your operation, especially considering all of the high cost of fertilizers, the high costs of all of the packaging. Since 2021, a lot of suppliers require 50% up front. So, having something like a quick turnaround on payment and, better prices is a big selling point.
Mm-hmm. So when a grower reaches out to you, do you then look at, do we have the demand for his supply long term, or do you do short term agreements because you need a supply and he has a supply? Or are you trying to build relationships with these how do you call it, like subcontracting farms or whatever? Is it a long term thing or a one time thing?
It's long term. So the way bananas work is pretty much everything is done on contract, either 1 year or 2 years. And so at the end of every year, I know how much volume I'm going to need. And so I'll work with our growers to say this, okay, you have this many hectares. This is how many loads you can get out a week. So I can commit to your volume and give you a fair year-round price, because the price of bananas varies dramatically. In the summer, it'll be like a fifth of what it is right now. So if they know that they have their volume that's already committed to a client, they don't have to worry about where am I going to place my fruit every single week, because they're harvesting every single week. And then they can just focus on, okay, well, the regular daily labors of running a farm.
And you're trying to give them a stable price throughout
Correct.
the year instead of riding the roller coaster.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the one that's setting the price, or is there a general marketplace?
There's a general market price, but yeah, I wouldn't say it is more of a general market thing.
Mm-hmm. Set by some of the larger suppliers, I would assume, or
so
there isn't a Chicago Board of Trade that's where bananas are being traded at.
It's a very rural situation down there. I mean, it's a lot of word of mouth. Even getting emails from our growers can be hard. A lot of it's just over WhatsApp. So yeah, the market prices are all word of mouth. Mm-hmm. But again, we're so close to everyone in the region because we were the first to start growing organic there, that we're in contact with most of the growers. Same, we're in contact with the exporters, the wholesalers. And so we're always, communicating so that we know what's going on.
Sure. We primarily work with Amish and Mennonite folks that have no phones. So can definitely you get WhatsApp harder. Messages. I'm a little envious.
Yeah, you can actually have people that WhatsApp you.
Wow, I guess I hadn't thought of that. That really puts things in a different perspective. I should be thankful for all of these WhatsApp messages I get at odd hours of the day.
No, sometimes I'm really thankful that they don't have phones in the house.
Yeah, because some of them are now getting some cell phones and they can text. There are some that I regret that actually got a cell phone. So when you make a commitment to a grower, let's say for a 2-year period, then do you, as the 2 years is coming to an end, if you need his supply, will you then just re-up it automatically, or how does that work?
So it honestly, it starts at the. We think of it as kind of being the representative for our growers' supply, right? But I first need to guarantee that the sale is there, and it's the same thing at retail and the distributor level. You contract a certain volume. So, for example, this year I've got my volume set. This is what I have contracted. I might need more because there might be higher demand. So, I know I might have to buy some at spot prices, but that way I'm able to guarantee that to my growers, and we've been working with them for, again, decades. And sometimes we'll work with additional growers if there's a spike in demand, but at this point our relationship with our growers has been there for so long that we might sign yearly contracts, though honestly, just like 3 years ago, contracts weren't a thing. I mean, if you asked a grower to sign a contract, it was like, you don't believe in my word? You're asking me to sign a contract? So it's interesting to see how it's been changing, but it's a lot just based on the relationship and the loyalty of decades of working together.
So when you know what your demand is, so now you're going to get the supply to meet that, and if the demand would spike, like you said, you're just buying spot loads at that point from trusted organic growers.
Right.
So you're really trying to not be oversupplied, I imagine.
Right.
Because
That's the worst.
is the kill.
Actually, I guess it sucks not to have enough supply either, but it's the absolute worst to tell a grower, I'm sorry, I can't take your fruit. So I do not want to be put in that position. I would rather have to buy a few loads at a higher price and take that risk than have to go back on.
So you don't guarantee, I mean, it's practically a guarantee, but if something were to disrupt the marketplace, you're not tied into guaranteeing that you'll take all that supply?
I guarantee them a certain volume.
Okay.
So for example, if they're able to supply 2 loads a week, that's what their farm is able to produce, then I tell them, okay, I commit to taking 2 loads every week the whole year.
And if they happen to produce a little bit more than that and you don't need it, that would be on them.
Yeah,
Okay.
then they would normally sell it at the national market.
Okay. Very, very interesting. I will definitely go on YouTube and look up banana harvesting because I am really intrigued now. I did watch a video, it's been a long time ago, where I remember seeing them come out on like a cable system, like bunches of bananas hanging. So, have you seen good growth in the marketplace over the last, say, 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, especially at the grower level, it's exploded. It seems like everybody's starting to switch over to organic in the region.
And let's say you want to put do you call them plantations? Or
farms, plantations, ranches.
Okay. But so let's say I wanted to start growing bananas down there and I had 20 hectares. When you plant an herb, how long does it take for that plant to actually produce?
9 months.
Is it just 9 months from a new plant, planted, 9 months? Okay.
And it doesn't come from seeds since, again, it's all the same plant. So you'll essentially take one of the sons from another plant, and I'll show you a picture a little bit later. They're actually very cute. They're like little tiny banana plants. And then it'll take 9 months for it to produce a bunch. And then from there, 10 to 13 weeks for them to be ready for harvest.
Okay. So to start a new, or like to expand your farm, is just taking stuff off of existing plants and planting. Okay. Very interesting. We're going to have to buy some grow bananas while we're out here.
Yeah.
So.
You can check out Jimbo's on your way up, or Lazy Acres. They carry our bananas.
Okay. Very cool. Well, Brian, is there anything else do you have questions on? Well, I have so many I don't even like.
I'm really appreciative of the base knowledge, the high level of what happens. It's fascinating. I mean, in a way, it's very similar to all other agriculture, but in another way, it's very unique, and that's exactly why it's interesting. So, no, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and share about your farms and your business.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for visiting us. I'm happy to be part of your podcast.